Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Am I interviewing you or are you interviewing me? Could go either way, actually, couldn't it?
that's a bit of both. Okay, so I'm not clear about your approach and your thinking and how you think about homelessness. So what's your kind of your frame of reference? Where does that come from? And how does it cause you to think about the issue?
Okay, well, I think my main frame of reference is to say that I'm not the expert. I talk with people who know far more about homelessness than I do because they actually work in homelessness services. I have never in my life done a night shift, in a night shelter or whatever, having mental health and so on. And I visit a lot of homelessness places, but I wouldn't say I'm a complete fraud. You know, I regard myself as a travel writer. You know, I just go and talk to people who really know what they're talking about. I think the reasons, the roots, should we say, not reasons, the roots by which people end up as homeless are so multiple and so varied. Yeah. What worries me is I think we talk of homelessness as if it was much the same thing for different client groups, different ages, in different countries. Mm-hmm. Homelessness is a very different thing in, say, in India or in Africa from what it is in Iceland, and even in different states in America. I think the extent to which there is a kind of support structure that people have fallen through, let alone resources, varies so much that the kind of people who end up falling through it's an extraordinarily complicated and fragmented area.
And why do you think like that? So what is it that has led you to think of a cross-cultural approach, a sort of sociodynamic approach?
Well, it's partly a long history as a mental health worker in being interested in understanding mental health from other countries and other cultures. You know, there's a lot of interest in race and mental health and understanding even whether people use the language of mental health in one another part of the world. So we're looking with populations of new migrants. We can't assume that the Western framework actually applies. So that whole sort of social construction of the way services operate. But then I was editor for a while of the Journal of Housing Care and Support, and homelessness was a major interest as well. It's of course been an interest of mine. And I started realising that actually a lot of the papers we were getting from other countries, I wasn't sure that the words meant the same things. It was even worse when we got papers from Russia or papers in French that you had to translate, but because you could find it notionally the correct translation. But even so, were we actually describing the same phenomenon when it's couched in such a different context of services and cultures and particularly funding frameworks, which often determine the language we use. You know, you use the language for the budget that you're accountable for. So that's what got me particularly interested. And then a number of conversations I've had since then have sort of brought home to me. You know, one really striking thing in all the stuff that you and I have been involved in, we've talked about hostels and youth foyers and refuges, and that's the kind of language that we think everybody understands. I was talking to a chap, Jay Levy in the States, a phone call a few months or so ago, and they don't use the word hostel. They talk about shelters. Well, shelters is what we're trying to get away from. We did away with shelters largely in the sort of 70s and 80s. So the language we use is actually, it's like apples and and PCs. They don't necessarily always join up.
I'm really interested. So I sort of get an idea about the things that you're interested in, and and I understand that that there's a very interesting issue about language, and it's not just cross-cultural; it's within our own culture, of course.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we often find ourselves talking and having to clarify the terms that what we mean. So I'm wondering where you see the kind of the bounds of your approach or your way of thinking. So where does it stretch to, and what's what's the focus, and then what are the bounds?
Well, that's a very awkward question.
What's the focus first of all? Where would you see the focus of your thinking in terms of what you think the nature of the issue is? And let's stick to the UK.
Okay, in terms of the nature of the issue, my observation is, I wouldn't put it any more strongly than that, my observation is that the people who fall through the nets, whatever their original difficulties in life, end up having a lot of the same kind of characteristics because of the situation they're in. So it's important to understand both. You need the individualised, personalised understanding of this person's own history and their biography, and maybe some clinical diagnostic stuff is useful as well. But a lot of what people end up in, they have in common because of the services they've ended up in and the way those services find people.
Okay.
So it's maybe it's a cop-out, but my feeling at the moment is that homelessness is such a major area where you have homelessness services. Whatever we define as homelessness, that will do for me.
Okay.
Somebody who's in prison doesn't have a home. Well, sometimes they do have a home to go back to. Somebody who's on a hospital ward doesn't have a home. Okay. So there are boundaries there where there are a lot of people with similar difficulties. A lot of kids, a lot of sort of 15, 18, 20-year-olds, temporary accommodation is normal when you're 18.
Absolutely.
You don't get, some people get a mortgage when they're 18, but shared living with other people.
Absolutely.
Staying on friends' floors for a while. There's no definition of homelessness that I think applies to everybody. And so for me, I'm just willing to work with the fact that if someone's in a homelessness services, they are radically excluded. And that's good enough for me to say this is me.
Okay. So it's defined by the environment where you find them.
I'm not even sure I want to call it a definition, to be honest, but you talk about focus, and that's, there's a fisheye lens element of it. But these are almost by definition the people who are missing out, who need help and support. That's as defined as I can make it.
Okay. So the reason I'm interested in definition is, well, who do we choose? Who do we need to be working with then? Who need an intervention? Given that people are multiply excluded from statutory and other services, if you have no definition, how do you work out who you need to work with?
Well, researchers need definitions more than practitioners do.
Well, I'm both.
Well, quite.
And as a practitioner, I'm also interested in, well, who do I need? Where do I need to place my skills, such as they are, and where don't I? There has to be that. I've only got a finite amount of time.
Well, I can go back to. I refer you to my original answer, which is, I'm not the expert on this.
No.
I can tell you how I spend my time.
Right, but that's what I'm interested in.
Well,
I don't think there is one way of thinking about it. So I would say that my focus is in the psychological, and it's very bounded. And whereas I absolutely acknowledge there are structural and societal problems, but my focus is in the kind of psychological, and the range, I guess, is it stretches to the individual and in relation to any environment, and then how where it goes in terms of behaviours. And I would acknowledge that is just one tiny bit.
Yeah, I would say that my focus is the psychosocial in terms of how people work and relate to other people. Okay. To me, I think that the most important environment for humans is other humans. The physical environment's important, but it's what it says about you, what it says to you. But the main environment that we live in is one of other people, and how we are seen by other people, how we see ourselves in terms of other people. That's what really gets under the skin and really saps your self-confidence, your pride, and so on. It's not actually the physical condition of the building. So that the way people relate with each other, and that taps into all the issues of community, the loss of community, the loss. So I'm very interested in community level interventions, and I don't think that's different from individual level interventions. No. I think they are seamlessly interwoven. But in addition to that, I'm very focused, I think, on social policy, on the way society organises and funds, or doesn't organise and doesn't fund, and cares or doesn't care. And the resources that we have that go into helping people recover, or that just let people fall, they are, as to my mind, just as much a part of the story, and in some ways more important than the individual biography or the individual vulnerability or the individual pathology, because it's the way society as a whole lets things happen.
Absolutely.
Or intervenes.
Absolutely.
I suppose one of the things I've been most keen to do when I got started on this road maybe 10 years ago, but certainly the last 5 since you and I have been kind of working more closely together, I think there is incredible creativity, not just commitment and sort of values-based stuff, but there's incredible creativity in homelessness services in the UK, at least. I think I'm getting snippets of it in other places as well. And it was something that people didn't talk about so much, or it was known about within a small
What do you mean by
world.
creativity?
Oh, enormously inventive ways of engaging people, finding solutions, helping people get back on their feet. The kind of creativity is as good a word as any, as I can say. People aren't just doing it by the book.
Yeah.
They're not just doing what they were commissioned to do. They're endlessly finding what will work with this individual or this population in this situation, and so on. So managers, I suppose, are doing more the sort of organisation level stuff. Individuals are doing rather more the one-to-one level stuff.
So is that where you see the creativity?